Live. Everywhere. On netrootsradio.com. David Waldman. Kagro. In the morning. Now, here's David Waldman.
Hey, good morning, everybody. How you doing? It is Thursday, September 9th, 2021. Time for another show. I have one eye on the Here Comes the Bus app. I don't think this bus is coming. I don't know. It's got some weird glitches, and every once in a while, the bus just disappears from the screen, but I've never seen it disappear for quite this long. So, okay, I don't know. I have a feeling that our kids will, or the one that's still taking the bus, will show up here, about 10 minutes into the show and just say, I don't think the bus is coming. So, luckily, we have some production assistants here at home today who can help us out with this stuff. All right, time for us to roll, though, even if the bus isn't. Kagro in the Morning show is live now. Bill in Portland, Maine lets us know today. After hearing that ivermectin causes sterility, that's true, in 85% of men, just by being nearby them, I think. Kagro X, me, David Waldman, now highly recommends that all Trump supporters get free boxes of it immediately. It's the patriotic thing to do. It's a thing to think about. I'm going to have the military deliver free ivermectin, the miracle drug, to all my friends, to all my supporters. In fact, unfortunately, I'll probably try and deliver it to everyone in America. I was rewatching the video that Trump made on October 8th, I think, after ordering himself out of Walter Reed Hospital. And this was the video in which he pitches Regeneron as a cure. I call it a cure. I love that his phrasing of everything is horrible. I call it a cure. So he calls it a cure for COVID, and he's going to send it to everybody. You may recall that it was, I'm going to send it free, or I'm going to give it free to every vulnerable senior in America. You're not, some people say you're vulnerable. I say you're not, but, some people do say that. I'm a senior. So he stumbles his way through that thing. It really is a remarkable piece of, I don't know what, Trumpaganda, I guess, in that it's not particularly convincing. Trump is actually kind of a terrible propagandist. If you know anything about him, I guess, if you're inclined to believe that he might be lying about something, I don't think you can listen to him and ever believe anything he has to say. And you can tell that he's fumbling his way through this with no script. But at any rate, the thing I had forgotten about for a while anyway was that not only does he promise it to every vulnerable senior in America, not only does he promise to make it free to everyone, but I had forgotten that he pledges to use the military to distribute it. And then he says, it's called logistics. Like, it's not called logistics unless the military is involved. But there's no logistics, I don't think, for the most part, involved in running the Trump organization. They just, get paid to, lend their name to things or whatever. So apparently they don't really actually do anything or make anything. So I guess he didn't realize that there was logistics and everything. It's not just military operations that are logistical. But in typical Trump fashion, he promises not only that everybody's going to get it for free, but the military is going to be delivering it. And last night, I just bring it up again because last night we hit another of the stupid grim milestones that I keep an eye on. 450,000 Americans have died since he said, one, that he was going to sign an immediate order so that the Regeneron could be delivered to everybody and delivered. 2, he said it would be free. 3, he said it would go to every vulnerable senior in America. 4, he said that the military would be delivering it. None of which happened. 450,000 people are dead. I understand that there are places where, at least for a while, you could, if you knew the right people and knew what to ask for and how to navigate the system, get Regeneron for yourself or one of the equivalent monoclonal antibody treatments if you were in the right stage of the illness and in constant contact with your doctor and had a doctor who was willing to navigate the bureaucracy and get this stuff for you, sometimes from a local hospital. It's actually, for some people, actually quite convenient to get, but very few people, comparatively, actually ever got their hands on it. Then, of course, Florida attempted to, I don't know what, I'm not sure what DeSantis thought he was doing, but rediscovered the Regeneron and decided that he, too, would make a pledge to give it to people for free. But he actually stood up distribution centers where people could go and, and report in and say, I need this stuff, and get it. And maybe it was free. I don't even know. I think they bragged that it was going to be free. But the only optics that came out of that were photos of people lying on the ground inside these distribution centers, curled up or writhing in pain while they waited for their free Regeneron. Clearly, having reported to the distribution center, probably too late for Regeneron to work its magic. I just wanted to remind everybody of that. And that, 450,000 people is, big roundish kind of number. And it won't be long until it's rounding its way off to 500,000. And honestly, I can't tell you why there aren't more people burning Donald Trump in effigy, having waited for their Regeneron and seen 2, 3, 4 of their relatives suffering in the hospital. In the meantime, getting nothing. And I guess if they believed him, anticipating a military delivery at any moment. I don't know how that was supposed to work. Show up at your door like FedEx. That wouldn't scare anybody. Anyway, there's real news that real live reporters are actually covering, having been assigned to it by the editors. And it, too, probably has a lot to do with optics. But let's check in with Greg Dworkin and find out where the Eastern elites media editors are sending their people. Find out what happened to the editors on their way to work yesterday. Good morning, Greg.
Good morning.
So
I just want to remind everybody, this is an August AP story. DeSantis top donor invests in COVID drug that governor promotes. So, if you're wondering what's going on, that's what's going on.
Right. The part that didn't make any sense to me was the free part. But occasionally, you get free, here's a free package of Fruit
Well,
Loops.
somebody has to buy it. If they then give it to you for free, that's
true,
after
right?
it's been purchased. So the people who make the money are the people making the drug.
That's true. As long as it's free to you, you don't know the difference. But yeah, if the guy's, I'll sell it to you,
if you give it away, or whether you charge 3 times what they did, then they'll just pay attention to that and up their prices.
Sure. And if there's a government in the middle, you can be sure. Oh well, how about if you're my friend? Why don't you order the government to send the money to me, and then the government can give it away for free? Okay.
All right, we'll have a rally at the Capitol, and I'll tell the government what to do.
That's probably what happened. Okay. Well, thank you for the reminder.
So there's a lot going on. I mean, some things are weird because, they're good news, but you won't necessarily hear it covered in the same grand fashion that bad news is. For example, AP this morning from Kabul, Afghanistan, Qatar.
Oh, I don't know, but
right?
yeah,
Qatar hero.
The country.
Qatari envoy says Qatar Airways
Got her.
plane at Kabul airport will fly Americans, Westerners out of Afghanistan.
Oh.
So evacuations are resuming.
Is it
for all the doom and
military
gloom
plane?
about we left them all behind? Actually, we didn't. We negotiated with the Taliban, but they're the devil. Well, yeah, they're the devil with air traffic controllers. So
yeah, and they're wearing Camp David slippers. I don't really know how that happened, but okay.
So
Your guy.
as people have pointed out on Twitter, this is why you negotiate with them.
Then people get out.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well,
right. Dozens of foreigners, including Americans, board flight from Kabul in first large-scale evacuation since U.S. pullout. Let's see how cable covers that.
Okay.
Just for the sake of argument.
Yeah, I'd like to see it.
Let's finish up with Afghanistan. Daniel Larison, who is a conservative, who's an anti-war conservative, so I was following him.
Okay.
Has a review of a piece in foreign policy. Foreign policy is a pay for, so you can't get behind the paywall, but it says the strategic logic of a forever war. The United States should have ignored sunk costs in Afghanistan and maintained a light military footprint. That was the argument in foreign policy. And Larison says this may be the most dishonest of the sustainable status quo arguments I've seen so far, and there's been a lot of competition for that distinction. You almost have to admire how proponents of staying in Afghanistan forever try to use the sunk cost fallacy against people that want it out. It's ridiculous, but you don't usually see that from hawks. If you asked any American says one of the commenters.
Oh, I'm one.
Immediately after 9/11, when the country was in shock, if we should go to Afghanistan for 20 years and change the reason for staying multiple times after killing bin Laden, the percentage that would have said, yeah, we should do that would be somewhere near zero.
Yeah, I guess so. I mean, maybe this family is in California who went visiting. Like, oh yeah, well then we could get a ride back at any time. But other than them, yeah, nobody would have voted for a 20-year presence, I don't think.
Right. Now, Trump, who avoided military service, Greg Miller from
he did. Yes.
A national security correspondent for the Washington Post, Greg Miller in a tweet frames properly how you discuss this. The story is Trump reaches out to families of U.S. service members killed in Afghanistan. It's political stunt.
Trump reaches out, eh? Okay.
And Greg Miller tweets, Trump, who avoided military service, taunted Gold Star family, didn't visit war zone for 2 years, skipped cemetery in France, has been calling relatives of service members killed in Afghanistan, quote, sensing a political opportunity, end quote. That's how you describe the story.
Yeah.
Not Trump, the commander-in-chief, actually called the relatives when, you know
Right.
who wouldn't. And they're mad at him. I mean, that's the framing. And we talked about this the other day. The inability of the press
Yes.
to look at somebody like Trump and just call it as it is because they feel obligated. Well, he has a lot of followers, so we have to treat him as if he's a serious...
Yeah, they're not subscribing.
You don't. You really do not. He's not president, and you don't have to treat him as serious.
Even if they are subscribing. That's true.
But you don't. I mean, this is not a serious, I really feel badly for the families and I'll reach out to them. He hasn't felt badly for anybody except himself in his 70-some-odd years on Earth.
Right.
Come on.
And they're the oddest of the years on Earth I've ever seen.
Yeah, pretty much.
Okay. I believe it.
That's
yeah,
right after,
that's
of
really
course, is Robert E. Lee was not a unifying force.
Ah, right. Yes, I did see that he put out some kind of statement saying that we would have won in Afghanistan if Robert E. Lee were around to lead us. I don't know where he comes by that, but doesn't matter. He wanted to tie the two issues together somehow and get a hit on Afghanistan into the middle of this. And
well, what happened is, of
Gosh,
course,
I doubt it.
in your own home state of Virginia, the Robert E. Lee statue
yes,
was being taken down.
right.
So Trump wrote, Robert E. Lee is considered by many generals to be the greatest strategist of them all. Lincoln wanted him to command the North, in which case the war would have been over in a day. Well, yeah, I mean, if the South joined the North, then the war would have been over.
Right, I mean, exactly.
Well, duh. Lee instead chose the other side because of his great love for Virginia, and except for Gettysburg, would have won the war. You know, except for all the battles he lost, he would have won.
Right. Also, that's an interesting thing. Because of his great love for Virginia,
But then he throws in at the end.
Yeah.
Our culture is being destroyed and our history and heritage, both good and bad, are being extinguished by the radical left, and we can't let that happen. If only we had Robert E. Lee to command our troops in Afghanistan, that disaster would have ended in a complete and total victory many years ago. What an embarrassment we're suffering because we don't have the genius of a Robert E. Lee. He didn't say anything about Pickett's charge here.
No, he did not.
Only a reference to, except for Gettysburg. Except for Pickett's charge and other mistakes that Lee made that were disastrous. He was great.
Right. Other than that, yeah, right. Well, I don't know where he comes by this. And by the way, of course, to turn down the command of the United States forces because of your great love for Virginia is also, evidence of your great antipathy for, if not hatred of, the United States.
Well,
that's who you're
my
going to war
favorite
against.
was, too bad the South didn't have a genius like Lee commanding its troops at Gettysburg.
Yeah. Too bad, in fact, there wasn't a genius like the guy who says he knows how to pick geniuses running the war in Afghanistan for the past 4 years. Except there was.
Right. So, no, I don't really think that the Washington Post has to keep treating things that Trump says as if they're serious. It's great that he's not on Twitter anymore. We don't have to read this garbage every morning.
Well,
so, what's happening in
retype
Afghanistan is fading from the news, even though we started off with that, simply because you don't always hear the good news when it fades.
Yes.
They just want to go back to that first day in Kabul. They keep showing the violence of the airport from 3 weeks ago because we want to, because, our correspondents are really still mad about it.
I'd like to see video of this Qatari plane moving, mostly because I want to find out if it's a civilian plane or a military plane, because those
it's a civilian plane.
Is it?
Yeah, but the
Have
thing
you
is
seen the interior of those
that
planes?
they don't really have any
Beautiful.
On the ground camera set up anymore.
There's probably cameras inside that plane. Those planes.
But they don't have the video, and so if they don't have the video, they don't talk about it.
They need to
Cable
distribute
is a visual medium.
Yeah. Oh, I'm surprised they don't have it. And the Qatari government probably could be distributing it because if they're on those, and not like Qatar Airways thing, I've seen the ads for the. Well, I mean, I guess not everybody's flying first class, but
right. So I got to finish off with Virginia since we were talking about Virginia and the Lee statue. It turns out
I want to talk about that.
This is an AP story that happens to be in the Atlanta Journal-Constitution, but
how did they get it?
There's an 1887 time capsule at the base of the statue that's set to be removed and open.
Oh.
Which is really kind of interesting.
Yeah.
Now that the statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee has been taken down, and I've never been to Richmond, I have to confess, and I never saw the monuments, the huge monuments in the Monument Avenue. Richmond, of course, was the old capital of the Old South. Now that a statue of Confederate General Robert E. Lee has been taken down from its perch above Richmond's Monument Avenue, crews plan to remove a piece of history from its gigantic pedestal. A time capsule from 1887, state officials believe is tucked inside the base, is set to be removed Thursday. That would be today. It will be replaced with a new time capsule. I guess they kept the cornerstone and the pedestal. They just removed the statue. So, maybe they'll put up a statue of William Shatner or something instead. I don't know. It will be replaced with a new time capsule that contains items reflective of current times, including an expired vial of the Pfizer COVID-19 vaccine, a Black Lives Matter sticker, and a photograph of a black ballerina with her fist raised near the Lee statue after racial justice protests erupted following the police killing of George Floyd last year. A newspaper article from 1887 suggests the copper time capsule contains mostly memorabilia, including a U.S. silver dollar and a collection of Confederate buttons. From the uniforms or from campaigns?
I don't know. That's a good question.
Just as buttons.
I'm guessing.
Of course, we're political people, so we're thinking, we have a I like Ike 1887 button.
Yeah, what would they have?
We collect those. I know people who collect those and have shows about it.
Right.
But one line from that article has piqued the interest of historians. Listed among the artifacts is a picture of Lincoln lying in the coffin.
Oh.
Unclear what kind of a picture it is, but the article says it was donated by Miss Patty Leake, who was a school principal from a prominent local family. Harold Holzer, a historian Lincoln scholar, says he believes it's highly doubtful it's actual picture or photograph, because there's only one known. It's more likely to be a popular Currier and Ives lithographic print of Lincoln lying in state New York, or a sketch done by somebody.
Aha.
So, but that'll be of interest, and we'll see what happens when they open it up.
Culturally relevant. They did those sort of things back then, and we don't now. I'd like to include a picture of Trump in a coffin in this time capsule. Could we do that? It's not an actual picture. It's just a rendering.
Well.
Could he pose for it, is the question.
So
I can talk him into it.
I read,
golden coffin.
This is how we get in trouble in the show, right?
What?
I read articles from McSweeney's, and you keep talking about Trump being hanged.
That's right. Well, I didn't say how he got there. He climbed in of his own volition, and he got right back out.
Well, today I didn't read the McSweeney's headline. I didn't make you read the entire article, but I really wanted to.
I do have a surprise for you, if you like. Well, we'll see what happens. We'll see what happens. If we talk a little bit about pandemic, I'll bring it for you.
Well, gee, that's funny. That's the next topic.
Okay, then. Tell us your feelings about vaccination and whether or not people should get the vaccine. Someone suggested that I grab this thing. And
well, I had a whole show on it yesterday.
Yeah.
About how people are really getting mad. And in fact, that's continuing. So, yeah.
All right. Well, so I'll tell you, I put on the soundboard. So now we can say, what does Greg Dworkin think we should be doing about the pandemic? We can just play.
Oh, my fucking God, get the fucking vaccine already, you fucking fucks.
Right. So
that's pretty much how I feel about it.
I find it funnier with the beeps in, actually, but. But the first time was great.
Could have done the whole first paragraph too.
Yeah, right. We'll have a reading, and we'll work on that.
All right. Thank you for making me immortal.
Right. Yeah, that is.
You should, and then at the end you should tack on enthusiasms.
Right. Oh, it's available.
Yeah. So here's Jonathan Bernstein, maybe paywalled. I'm not sure. It's Bloomberg Opinion.
Oh.
Another Biden COVID speech. Here's why it's smart strategy. Today he's going to give a speech on COVID. Now, we may in fact be peaking. There's certain states, clearly, I sent you a graph today. You can look at your favorite worldometers, but I used my COVID site looking at individual states together on a graph, and you could see Florida, Texas, and California, some of the big states, are clearly peaking in terms of cases reported.
No peaking. Yes. But in this case, go ahead.
So now the Northeast may be going up a little bit as school starts, but I don't think it's going to be anywhere near what it was for those bad states. Tennessee is the major state having a problem right now. There are no minor states. And as a matter of fact, it's not like it's over, but concurrent with that is a fairly robust weekly jobs claim. Weekly jobless claims post a sharp drop to 310,000, another new pandemic low today, below estimate. Continuing claims fell to 2.78 million, drop of 22,000. And so that's good news. And so Biden's got some good news on COVID to talk about, as well as the country starting to reach some of his goals and passing them. And so he's giving a speech. Okay. And as Jonathan Bernstein in Bloomberg writes, the time is right for it too. The summer wave may well have peaked and perhaps begin to ebb. Both private and government vaccine mandates have become more widespread. You read a new one every day.
True, yes.
I just read a Qantas airline is going to require all the passengers to show proof of vaccination. About time the airlines did that.
Qantas.
The U.S. hit Biden's July 4th goal of getting at least one shot to 70% of all adults on August 2nd. Remember, one shot alone isn't enough. In the subsequent weeks, that number has risen to over 75%. It'll continue rising as more mandates take effect. It may hit levels high enough to beat back an expected winter wave, or at least keep it from shutting down too much of the nation. And that remains the most important thing for Biden and the Democrats when it comes to elections. Remember, Biden doesn't need to be popular now. He needs to be popular next summer. And so next summer, I would expect Andrea Mitchell to be showing pictures and video of the Kabul airport on day one. And fall for Democrats in the fall to do well in 2022 midterms. And, that's all background. He notes media attention is a finite resource. Time spent reporting on the pandemic cannot be devoted to infrastructure or to other democratic legislative priorities or to anything else. The infrastructure, including Afghanistan, that's why Afghanistan's fading. The infrastructure and spending bills now being debated in Congress are important, but it's not clear that additional attention to them would help divided Democrats reach an agreement. Okay. So there'll be pressure on Manchin, who's urged a pause, nor is publicity for legislative deal-making apt to be a short-term political winner. Public pressure might be more appropriate for voting rights legislation, but without a viable strategy, you can't do that either. So that's another reason to give a speech on the pandemic. That's something you can do, or appear to or do something about.
Yes.
Right? What could you do? Make a big push for school testing. That's one of the things he's going to wind up doing.
Okay, that's
in the
would
speech.
Be a good idea. Okay, let's make that
Very
speech.
Good idea. And again, to put this in perspective, Senator Ron Johnson on September 3rd said, nurses, doctors, and other healthcare workers are reaching out to me with heartbreaking stories about vaccine mandates. Read their stories and see why I believe these mandates are an attack on healthcare freedom. But just today, Mississippi Free Press, Ashton Fitton reporter, writes, fetal deaths have doubled on unvaccinated women who get COVID. While pregnant in Mississippi.
Yes, right.
Among fetuses whose mother were infected, the state identified at least 72 stillbirths, twice the expected figure. So he's complaining about the pressure mandates are causing. And in fact, on the one hand, actual COVID is worse.
Yes.
Okay. And of course, here's an attention-getting headline, which you don't have to take to the bank in terms of absolute fact. The reason I'm highlighting it is it's in the news. This is a Florida station repeating a Texas headline. Ivermectin causes sterilization in 85% of men, study finds.
Yes. All of them, even the ones that don't take it.
Well, the other 15% are eunuchs. So, that's the kind of, and they have that great Ivermax equine medicine with the horse picture right there on the box.
It's not horse
in case you were wondering what it was. And,
I just like horses.
Yeah. It says removes worms and bots.
Yeah, I noticed that. I don't
It's a
know what that's.
boticide.
I don't know what
Do you use it on
that
Twitter?
is.
Does that get rid of all the trolls?
I wish it would, but yeah, I'm not a horse person, so I
Well,
don't
you
know
have to
what
paste it on.
bots
You have
are.
to smear the paste on your computer screen.
I guess so, and then your computer's sterile after that.
Well, yeah, but then it gets a virus, so it's not clear. It works against viruses. That's the whole point. And so you're better off with an antiviral program. So the whole context of what's going on here is slow but steady improvement after a recent COVID peak has gotten everybody's attention as school opens up. Connor Sen writes Delta stabilization has led to Delta stabilization, as Delta says booking trends are stabilized in the last 10 days. So
Delta, I see.
Yeah. So it's if things get really worse, it's bad for them. Well, they're not getting worse; they're actually getting better. Well, we don't want to highlight that. We only highlight when it bleeds. It leads. Well, okay, but this is the whole background here. So yeah, it's a really good time to make a speech about this. And you know who else is speaking out about how important it is to take the virus seriously and continue with antiviral precautions, including non-pharmaceutical interventions, otherwise known as NPIs? That would be Barack Obama, who's doing a closing argument ad for Gavin Newsom in the recall.
Okay.
Right?
Well, that's better
You
than the
need
usual answer.
to take these precautions, and if you vote for the other guy, you're going to wind up losing everything California has. Vote no on the recall because Newsom is doing it right with COVID. And, of course, California is dropping in terms of its numbers. So it's a pretty good closing ad. And we'll talk about Elder's response to that after the break.
Okay, well, it's a good answer because the usual answer to, you know who else, blah, 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 usually Hitler. So I like this one better.
Sup fam, it's your boy Darwin, aka Darwin_Darko, aka the most reasonable man in America, aka KITM's senior black correspondent. You might remember me from such recordings as Spacemen vs. Space Cadets and We Need to Talk About Joe Biden. Today, I want to bring you good news about that thing you've been struggling with. Do you suffer from giving too much of a damn? Do you turn on the series of tubes and find yourself outraged at the particular way some news organization strung some sentences together only to realize, nope, this is not some fictional hellscape? Well, guess what? You no longer have to accept the life of giving too much of a damn. You can do something about it, because even you, yes you, can be a show contributor. Now I know what you're thinking. Hey, Mr. Most Reasonable Man in America, I'm not some professional podcast talking guy. Don't worry about it. Do you have a smartphone or some other electronic recording device? Well, that's all you need. You too can have a segment where you can read us an important article and give us your take. Read one of your own original essays, or even just give us your commentary on something you'd like to share that's important to you. Fair warning though, side effects may include general punditry, having opinions and hot takes, getting stuff off your chest, and hearing your own voice. If your recording lasts longer than 5 to 7 minutes, please consult kagrox@gmail.com. That's KAGROX@gmail.com.
All right, welcome back, everybody, to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio. I've just had a chance to preview that Barack Obama ad. Looks pretty good. Standard stuff, but, it's nice to hear from him, and it'll make a big difference, I hope.
Well, it's the closing argument there.
Yeah.
The whole recall thing is stupid. Not only is it stupid, but if you vote for Larry Elder, and they don't mention him by name, of course, you're going to set California back because Newsom's doing all the right things about COVID control, and you don't want to just give all that stuff up. And in fact, that's one of the things that people care about. How is it going? The Hill has a piece this morning. Larry Elder warns of, quote, shenanigans in California recall election. He's already afraid he's going to lose, so he's starting to say the election is rigged. Does that sound familiar?
It does, and it looks like that's the reason why he has a picture with Donald Trump in this ad.
What I believe is that no matter what they do, and I believe that there might well be shenanigans, no matter what they do, so many Californians are angry about what's going on. What are they angry about? Crime and homelessness.
Yes. That is the main thing on people's minds as they walk around in masks.
Well, homelessness is a big deal. And, of course, it's a bigger deal because, California homes burn.
Yes, true.
Which will make you homeless. And so those are the sorts of things he's ignoring as if California's unaware. They're unaware of COVID and they're unaware of fires. He can't do anything about those things, so there's no point in him writing about it. If you elect me, I will make COVID go away and I'll put out all the fires.
Well, like Greg
I'll also lower your taxes and
Eliminate
raise all your
rape.
benefits.
Right. And we'll eliminate rape and all crime, really, basically. We'll have a
Yes.
utopia and starships, and Mr. Spock will be hanging out with you. It'll be great.
Right. Kamala Harris was there for Newsom on Wednesday. Biden's expected to be there as well. And then Obama,
After the
they know
speech.
will be in a TV ad. We just talked about that. And 30% of ballots have already been cast.
Okay.
Now,
We could
again,
use some
just
more.
because you know the party, of who's turning in the ballots, you don't know how they voted.
Yes, right. That's secret.
It's a
This is
secret ballot.
ballots. Yeah.
Right, but California's been voting by mail for a long time. So thinking about shenanigans, I don't know if that's really going to play well.
Totally rigged.
Yeah, totally rigged, exactly. So you know where that's coming from, and
Already coming.
the background again for all of that is first is going to be that recall, which it looks like, I don't know that he's going to cruise, but it looks like Newsom will keep his seat, which is important
Well, he better.
because among other things. Not only does it set a media narrative, because everything California does sets a media narrative. It's so large. But, he's got a Dianne Feinstein problem to keep an eye on.
Yes, right. That
It's
became
an open
issue.
secret that Dianne Feinstein isn't clicking on all cylinders. And so replacing her because she refuses to acknowledge it and or step down is something that Democrats have in mind.
Yes. It could become necessary regardless of her stubbornness. And, yeah, you don't want a Republican or any, random kook that gets put in there by the stupid recall. I really don't know how they ended up with that thing. But, you got to be careful who's governor of that state. They lucked out the last time they did their recall just in terms of, getting Arnold Schwarzenegger. And there was every reason to believe he could have been a total incompetent. And he actually, sort of took the job seriously, And
At least, yeah.
That's not what
Yeah,
you're
he
likely
didn't
to
govern
get
like
now.
a Madison Cawthorn takes
Yeah.
governance or Marjorie Taylor Greene takes governance.
Right,
Which
right.
is to say it's all theater and I don't even have to show up for my job. He tried.
Yeah, I mean, there are lots of people who will tell you, and probably rightly so, wasn't a great governor. But he was a
But he wasn't a
Republican at
disaster.
bottom. Right. But yeah, it wasn't a joke. And it easily could have been. And everybody thought it might be at the time. But yeah, I mean, I commend him, especially now on his COVID activity. I mean, he knows what the hell he's doing and has his head screwed on right in terms of telling people what to do for their health. So that's a rare thing
again,
among Republicans alone.
people-
but
We have to remember this is a celebrity-driven culture.
yes,
And celebrities like Jesse Ventura and Arnold Schwarzenegger and Donald Trump,
right.
start with a built-in advantage because they're celebrities.
Yes.
And then you could squander that,
Yes.
and you could make it go away,
Okay.
and you could be a joke like Caitlyn Jenner running, or you can leverage that and use that to win your election, like Ronald Reagan did, who was an actor.
Yes. Not many fans of his presidency here, but
But even, going back to being governor first.
yes. Oh, that's true.
Reagan was governor before he was
Right.
president. So by the time he ran for president, he had cred. But, just in running for governor,
Right. Okay.
why should you be governor of California?
famous.
Well, I'm a Hollywood celebrity, and everybody in California knows Hollywood. It's an engine
Right.
of,
Republicans
economic
love
growth here.
Hollywood.
So I know something about it by dint of the fact that I was in a hospital once, so I know all about medicine.
We do have some of those running around too. Yeah. Well, okay. Anyway, you could do a lot worse than Schwarzenegger, and Republicans are trying very hard to do worse. So
Yeah, they're doing their best. So, again, it's the question on the table is always in a highly polarized society, which is what we are.
we are.
How much of it actually filters down to voters? Sure, the political people are pretty clear about what their voting priorities are,
Okay.
People on the Democratic side who are quite interested in elections and politics look at this and say, I like this policy, that policy, that policy. I think it's important. I think it's important as a whole. I could step back and take the big picture, yada, yada, yada. And people on the Republican side who are really into this, can step back and say, look, I'm a white supremacist, and that's the end of it, And I really feel strongly about this, and so I'm going to show up at every school board election. And then you have low information voters who hate politics, who don't pay attention to anything, and that's where being a celebrity matters. Because, all right, at least I recognize this name. And then you have the so-called moderates who are really a collection of, on the one hand, I'm a fascist, but on the other hand, I'm a libertarian. And so I have these conflicting interests here. I really hate what Texas is doing, so I'm the Democratic side about that when it comes to, taking away women's rights. But on the other hand, I'm a white supremacist too, so I'm really torn. If you average my views, I'm a moderate, and I just don't really know. So I'm up for grabs in this election. Okay, how do we talk to a person like that? Well, you try to pick some neutral topic that really doesn't have anything to do with anything, and you talk about that. So that's where, you could come up with something that maybe is pandemic related or economic related that has nothing to do with white supremacy, and it has nothing to do with, abortion rights or forced birth. Yeah. And it's hard, and so, okay, we'll work with that guy. Somebody with similar views may find that I'm not really interested in that. I'm interested in some third or fourth or fifth topic. So, if you're really interested in governance, you have to suck it up and swallow the idea that policy isn't going to get you anywhere. You really have to do emotional appeals and or, here are my credentials. And that's where Gavin Newsom runs into some issues.
No.
He's trying to govern California, and he's a rich guy from wine country.
Well,
how do you relate? Well, you don't do it by going to fancy restaurants named the French Laundry in the middle of a pandemic. That was just such a huge political mistake because it encapsulated what people don't like about Newsom.
Yes, or California, for that.
So, you got to pay attention to at least those things. But all of his policies for this, that, and everything else. Yeah, but he went to that damn French Laundry thing in the middle of the pandemic when he was telling everybody else not to, and that's what I remember.
Yeah, well, yeah. It plays differently inside and outside California. Like, to me, why not? That's typically Californian, of course. Why wouldn't you go to it?
Well, because the rich guy from wine country went to a rich wine country restaurant, while the rest of us are trying to make a living and figuring out how to put food on the table when the restaurants are closing down. How does that make me loyal to him?
I don't know. It's different for Californians who actually have to live that. For me, I say that sounds like a Californian being Californian.
It's just reminiscent of Texas during the pandemic.
I hate you all.
Where we looked at it and said, this is really terrific that, strong policies are put in place. And enough Texans said, yeah, but you're taking food off the table, and I really want things to be a little loosened. I get that the pandemic's a problem, but day to day, I got to put food on the table. I want the restaurant that I work at open.
Yep. Probably true. And certainly different, and we love Californians. Just kidding. But yeah, it does make me think that, to me, I don't know. Every time I hear about California, it's one of those things.
Well, how about every time you hear about Florida?
Yeah. Well, every time I hear about Florida,
there's no California
guy
man the way
eating
there is
an
a Florida
alligator
man.
or something.
And there's no California like don't mess with Texas.
Yeah.
So the other thing, of course, is when you're reading about Florida, I always look, every time I open up a Florida story, is, okay, where's the alligator? There's got to be an alligator in the story somewhere.
You know what happens when someone says Florida man does something? Well, and I think California man, I think wine country guy goes to a fancy restaurant. Totally wrong. Many, many more millions of Californians for whom that has nothing to do with everyday life. But that's California man for you.
Of course, the San Francisco versus L.A., Northern versus Southern California.
Yeah, that's true.
Narrative is, in fact, real.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, every state's got one of those.
Sure.
I don't even think
but
South
California's
Jersey
so big that the narrative really is quite different too. And then of course Inland Empire and it's just such a complicated mixed a metaphor state. It's really hard to say, oh well, that's California. Florida's easier. Right. It's that guy wrestling alligators because they attacked his dog. That's Florida. Yeah. Except the thing is, he had no pants on and he was drunk and he did it in his car.
Right. Yeah. Okay, so that's kind of a. What would you say? That's a panhandle kind of a thing, but also an Everglades kind of a thing. I don't know.
Well, that's what you read about. Anyway, so how ultimately will a Ron DeSantis play out? Well, his numbers are dropping. while the morgue cases rise. And Florida is the one state, hopefully, in fact, has peaked and is starting to come down a little bit. But so. I think all of the governors are going to have a reckoning at some point. And again, things will get under control because the mandates that are going to be coming from businesses, not the government, are going to help push those numbers down. But that's a long-term strategy. You still need masking, NPIs, non-pharmaceutical interventions, spacing. Again, try to do it sensibly. Don't deep clean the schools. It's not a surface area thing. Yes, wear the masks. Is it as important to wear outside? No, it isn't. But you have to get your vaccinations and do those other things. And if you do so, you too can be like the Northeast.
All right. Yeah. I'd like to see some more work on convincing people to stop deep cleaning the schools. We're wasting a lot of money.
Use it for testing.
Yeah. And you go to
because billions of dollars, like $10 billion was given by the feds to the states in order to help manage school things like testing. What did you do with the money?
We cleaned.
We deep clean. Exactly. And so, that's the kind of thing that really ought to be discussed at school boards, not critical race theory.
Yeah, that's the thing I wonder about. Like, if you went to the school board and said, stop wasting money deep cleaning the schools, I think a good percentage of parents who are conscientious about the virus and want precautions taken would start yelling at you, thinking you were a COVID denier.
And spend more time testing our children. And working on the mask mandates.
Lead with that and say, we need more of that. And how are we going to pay for it? Use the deep cleaning money, because that's a waste. It's not.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah, I guess you have to frame it right, because you could get yourself shouted down pretty quick. But yeah, we got this is kind of a huge waste of money. And I still see that at schools all over the place when they have now these, when they run into a spike and they say, well, we're closing for a couple of days for a deep cleaning because it was the dirty school that did it. I don't think so. But okay, well, we got some work to do to convince people that's not going to help. I don't know.
True.
Got orphaned in this whole mix-up. All right.
Anyway, that's my segment for today. That's basically what's going on. Those are the big stories. And no, the Texas issues haven't faded, but that's more of a simmering right now at the moment, a simmering anger that has not gone away. And I think that more of that has to play out in real life. The idea that you can't count on business to do the right thing still continues. Sometimes they do and help drive things, and sometimes they don't. And, a lot of times what happens is they have to step back and reassess. What kind of stand should we take about the Texas law? Who works with us? Who works for us? How much would it impact us if we don't say anything? And how much will it impact us if we do say something?
Yeah.
And so those internal deliberations sometimes take a while.
Yeah. Well, that's a tough one. And there have been a couple of corporate outfits that have spoken out. And, it's a tough one. And I imagine that there are certainly, I guess, some companies that could probably afford to stay out of it if they want to. But, yeah, I don't know. I don't know how I would advise anybody to proceed in that. You'd really have to take a look at it can't be an empty gesture either. Well, we're not going to do any business in Texas, or none of our people will travel to Texas for business. If you don't already, that's not a big deal. I don't know how far you'll get announcing that you're not going to do that. Well, it might work because people aren't going to check on you. I don't know. Cynical a little bit.
Well, just a good reminder that we're not where we need to be as a country. We knew that, but here's yet another different example. And with that, that'll be it for the week. Oh, I should mention there's also stuff going on in Congress.
What?
They're doing, I guess tomorrow's going to be the first bird bath. Which is to say the Robert Byrd rule that says that certain things cannot be used for reconciliation, a topic to be worked out with the parliamentarian.
Right.
And the first iteration of that's tomorrow, supposedly. So that's always an interesting conversation.
I think they.
For those of you who don't like compromise, this is a bad time to be alive.
Too bad.
Because you're not going to get everything you want. And the amount of money that's going to be spent on the $3.5 trillion reconciliation bill is going to be less than $3.5 trillion.
Very likely.
In my view, the important thing is that it passes, not that you get everything. And so get used to the fact you're not going to get everything you want. And no, brilliant schemes like just fire the parliamentarian and get one you like are not going to solve all the problems. Yes, you can do it. You have that problem. You have that solution. It's doable.
Yes.
It can get you past one thing, but it's not going to get you past everything.
Man, it might not, too. I mean, parliamentarians come from a narrow band of folks, and the next parliamentarian is likely to be one of the assistant parliamentarians right now, and they're trained by the current parliamentarian, and you do face the possibility of firing the parliamentarian only to have the next parliamentarian say, I'm still not going to help you.
Right.
So,
that's like looking at the Supreme Court. Why don't we just expand the court? That'll fix it. It will, but
for now,
that's not likely to happen.
Well, that's true. Well, I hope. I mean,
we hope,
really,
and maybe it should, but hope and should aren't the same things as, okay, here are the votes.
No, but like teaching people to stop deep cleaning the schools, it's a thing we ought to work on. Courts
absolutely,
expand.
without question.
We do these
but
things.
Working on something means you accept the fact that you're not going to get what you want right away.
Oh,
that's the thing about Republicans. They spend 30, 40 years working on the school board stuff, and we get mad if we don't get what we want in this month.
And that is ironic, given that they are gimmitarians, and it's all supposed to be about instant gratification for them. And the truth is that there are some hardworking, scheming plotters on their side that, are in it
that
for
are willing
the
to take
haul.
the long view. So you need both.
That's true.
And we need the long-term thinkers here.
Yeah.
And by the way, elections matter, and Supreme Court appointments do matter as well. So keep that in mind next time.
Okay. I will.
If there is a next time. So take care, and we'll see where we're at on Monday after we summarize all the stuff that's happened. But keep an eye on Congress. Things are happening there. Keep an eye on Biden's speech today. See what he comes up with in terms of COVID. Don't worry about his polling right now. It's really relatively immaterial. You could do worse than what he's doing. He's not Jimmy Carter, unlike Brett Gardner's failed column career. He's not a failed president, as Brett Gardner claims. Brett Stevens. Brett Gardner's the ex-center fielder for the Yankees. Brett Stevens, who I've stopped reading, really, basically, honestly, because it's just too stupid.
Well, yeah.
But, if you write stupid stuff and you're wrong about it, you're pretty much, that's guaranteeing you job security, because, you never get fired.
Right. If you find the right institution that thinks it's fun to be contrarian.
Well, that'll be the New York Times.
Okay, we got him. All right. Well, thanks very much, Greg, and thanks also. I'll give a thanks to I might butcher the name, but Matt Daskovich, who gave me the idea via the YouTube comments yesterday, begging me please to isolate your reading of the McSweeney's headline from yesterday and to have it available as a sound clip to remind everybody that it's time to get vaccinated.
Oh, send it to me and I'll slow it down. I was speaking New Yorkese.
Yeah, okay. Well, I'll give it to you.
It just seemed right for the
sure,
content.
Absolutely. And everybody who knows, what's in it, they're excited to hear it. Okay, so thanks, Matt. Good idea. And he's
who
heard
exactly
it.
Do you get in trouble with for using the F word on the air? Anyway?
I guess.
Who's looking over your shoulder?
I don't know. Nobody.
This isn't FCC stuff.
No, it's not. And I explained it sort of yesterday. Just sort of, it's as I'm putting the podcast up on Libsyn, there's this this one fateful checkbox where it says, all right, so is your podcast adult or is it clean? And then there's a not rated button, and I sit there and I go, well, I wouldn't say it's adults only. Jeez, it was 2 seconds. But is it clean? I don't know. And I'll agonize over that.
Well, you can do a not rated one for that one show, right?
Well, or I forget. And like yesterday for about 6 hours, that one was up marked clean because that's the default. It's like, okay. That's definitely not clean. I got to change that. And so I swapped it out for the bleeped one so that I could click. I could say not rated, but then I'm worried about there'll be people out there who have filters, and I'm not going to accept anything that isn't clean. And that guy might not get my podcast. And then what am I going to do?
Well,
I'm making
I
problems
suppose there's
for
somebody
myself.
out there who plays the show for their 6-year-old who's interested in parliamentary procedure.
Yes, right. You know, the kids. You got to think about the
You
kids.
got to think about the kids.
Otherwise, where's the future of parliamentarianism going to come from? I don't know.
Exactly.
I can talk to Matt about it. He identifies on Twitter as frontier psychiatrist. So I guess I could talk it out with him, and he'll convince me of what Gil's been trying to convince us of all this time. Just go ahead. Nobody minds.
Well, I just went ahead.
All right. Yep, you did it. Well, you asked permission, and that was fine. And I
then
didn't
pay
realize I was
attention to
getting
you,
like
like
85.
like I always do on the show.
Right.
Can I do this? Thank you so much. Here, I just did it.
That was that. What
Works
if I
for
had
me.
said no? Yeah. Okay. Well, thank you. This is a great intro to the Greg Dworkin weekend, where Fridays are off, and we should all work on that schedule from now on. And maybe that's one of the things that can grow out of the pandemic. Is everybody
3-day
working at
weekends?
home?
We like it. All righty.
Okay.
Take care, and I'll
Great.
talk to you Monday.
Will do. All right. We'll be looking out for news in between then and now. And, we've got some. All right. One more time then, Greg, as you're on your way out. Everybody can hear it one more time.
God, get the vaccine already, you fucks.
It's pretty
That's
good.
That's show policy.
Yeah, that's right. You're not allowed to on the show. Your comments.
It'd be funny?
What?
If Biden said that during his speech.
That would be something. Is there any way we can hack in and play that over it? And,
I could take a video of his speech after it's done and just add that as the soundtrack.
yeah.
That'd be wonderful.
Oh, it'll be like we could make a deep fake of him doing that. Somehow.
Just wait. I'm going to send that to you on Monday.
And we might not even
Alrighty,
have to
take
fake
care,
it.
and I'll see you then.
All right. It'll be a big effing deal. Thanks, Greg. Okay, let's switch on over then to our story reserves, if you will, in Pocket and in the Twitter stream and all sorts of things. Let's see. What have I stored away for myself? That is, now inaccessible. But in tweet form, it's difficult to see what I've stored. But a story from, I guess the story itself is no longer available because it's paywalled. But from the Tennessean, I just happened to see this. What was that made this relevant? I don't remember what we were talking about yesterday. Or maybe it was just an independently interesting story. Brett Kelman, a Brett writing for a newspaper who's doing a good job. Healthcare reporter for the Tennessean, not Brett Stevens, who's doing a terrible job for the New York Times, unless he's supposed to be doing this, in which case he's doing a great job being terrible. I'm trying to be positive about this, but Brett Kelman, who's doing a great job being great, let's say, for lack of any other, let's say there was only one word for a positive outcome and it was great. That's how we would say it. Well, this news from, again, from Tennessee, which I mentioned the other day. Did I? I don't know. As I'm watching the daily numbers that I post each evening from Worldometers, Tennessee has kind of crashed to the top of the list in terms of the number of residents infected per million. And if I'm not mistaken, there we are. The total cases of COVID per 1 million in population. Yeah, at the moment, Tennessee stands atop the entire United States with 163,321 cases per million, or a 16.3% infection rate. I've been watching it because, of course, we were all expecting Florida to crash to the top. I've mentioned a couple of times that for the better part of a year, the Dakotas sat atop that list. North Dakota at the top, South Dakota in second, and then briefly in third place. And South Dakota, despite the fact that they hosted Sturgis once again recently, sits now in sixth place. I mean, it's nothing to sneeze at. They're doing terribly. But so far, by the way, I don't think I've seen some reporting on Sturgis and the outbreaks, but the numbers haven't been as disastrous as we once thought they might be. I'm curious to find out about vaccination among the bikers. You would think that they'd be among the most resistant, and I'm sure that a certain core of them are. But remember also that increasingly the biker crowd is geriatric at this stage. I'm not really certain what happened, but they're just not bringing up their kids in the biker tradition, I guess. Or I don't know. The young people today, they just don't like driving around on motorcycles from the 1960s and 1960s fashions. And we don't know why. But still some people do. And I think that they might have been more vaccinated than we gave them credit for, which would be good news. But, still, they seem to be spiking pretty badly in South Dakota and in the neighboring states. But everybody's spiking. It's a little more pronounced up there in the area and the places where most of the bikers came from or went to. But, we're all, there's nobody doing great at this stage. But anyway, Tennessee now, kind of out of nowhere, unless you've been watching the lists for a long time. And even if you have, there's nothing calls out Tennessee the way Florida does, or nothing, or Sturgis in South Dakota for that matter. But Tennessee, yes, top list. Florida quickly catching up and briefly taking over, I think, at the top spot recently when Tennessee suspended its reporting for the weekend, but Florida did one of their catch-up reports. But pretty soon they'll overtake them. And by the way, I did see, observed by our friend Charles Gaba the other day, who's now, as I say it, I'm like, wait, didn't I learn that his name had some kind of odd pronunciation to it that I never knew about? And I filed it away in my brain somewhere and forgot about it. But he was pointing out Florida, not that unlikely in the near future to overtake the rest of the states in terms of deaths per million, too, which used to be a huge bragging point for Florida. I think they were lying, but they used to brag about it. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Netroots Radio as I grab a sip of water, trying to get it done in time and failed to do so. But as I had mentioned, Tennessee rising in the stats, and keep an eye out for Florida. We did hear from Charles the other day that, or just last night, I think, that, I hate to peg it to numbers this way, but with the numbers of deaths that Florida's reporting, they're not that far off. And about, in another 18,000 or so deaths. And that's an awful lot, obviously, especially for just one state. But it looks to be, looks like they may be on pace to do it in a relatively short amount of time. But another 1,800 deaths puts them at the top of the list. They'll actually surpass New Jersey, which has sat at the top of the list of deaths per million since forever, since the very beginning of the pandemic. And like I said, there used to be a bragging point for Florida that even though I think, like we said, that they might have been telling something other than the truth about their rates of death and causes of death in Florida, they did brag about it. And for a while, when we all thought Florida really, was going to crash through and make its way to the top of the list, I guess during the January, February spike, nationwide spike, Florida actually sat, for whatever reason, at about the midpoint, right about 25th on the list in terms of the rankings of the states, in terms of deaths per million. And they were still bragging about it when they made it to 20th or so in the latest spike. And then they, it's been accelerating. So during this latest Delta variant spike, they've gone from about, they probably crept up to about 22nd or so before it really started to heat up. And they've, slowly been making their way up the list. And now they're jumping by leaps and bounds. They're currently 14th in the country, and with the number of people they have there who are currently infected and the statistical rate at which we can expect some of those illnesses, unfortunately, to resolve themselves in deaths, it's not unlikely that they'll be cracking the top 10 any day and in position to perhaps take over. That's one of the things about the red states that initially thought that they were going to be spared this whole thing, just like Jared Kushner told them they would be, that this was a blue state phenomenon, and that's why there wasn't going to be a robust national response from the Trump administration. It was going to kill Democrats, so they were going to let it, rampage. But then they forgot that Democrats will take vaccines and Republicans won't, and lo and behold, fortunes reversed because dumbness, and that's what you end up with. It now becomes a red state phenomenon, and they're happy to have it be that way for some reason. I don't know why exactly, but anytime people are bragging on how they're doing about COVID, I just say, give it time. Given time, I don't think that your braggadocio will reflect well on you. As people say on Twitter, this won't age well. I was taking a look in an old thread that came up, I guess, right after the word broke about what was happening in Florida and what their pace was going to do to their ranking. Looking at old tweets about it from July of last year, July 2020, and lots of people, bragging on how well Florida was doing, and people saying, well, just watch and see, and they're saying, haha, you liberals, you think you understand everything. You don't, and guess what? Those tweets did not age well. All right, to turn back to Tennessee, though, I told you that Brett Kelman was doing such a great thing here. He's got a very interesting article. This is the one thing I know that Brett Kelman has done. So as far as I'm concerned, he's fantastic across the board. I don't know what else he's written, but maybe I'll go find out. Can't read the article, though, but Brett Kelman is such a good reporter. He tells us what's in the article on Twitter. A little bit, it's a self-defeating thing, and I hope they never find out at the editorial board over there what Brett's done here. But in the meantime, we've gotten news from Tennessee, and that's what he's all about. Tennessee once texted 32,000 families, you probably remember this story, 32,000 families to encourage teens to get vaccinated, and then 2 days later, Republican lawmakers pressured the state to stop the outreach to teens, and it did. And you remember how dumb that looked, but how predictable it is for a state run by Republicans. Well, anyway, it did stop, and now internal documents revealed in his piece for the Tennessean, which I can't read in full because I haven't paid them yet. Internal documents show the reversal was more sudden and dramatic than we knew. So he summarizes it for us because it's his article, and I guess it's his prerogative to do that. This story builds on prior reporting on Tennessee's vaccine backtracking. We already knew the health department barred staff from advocating for any child vaccinations. But 1 month beforehand, it texted families to urge teens to get vaccinated. What happened in between? Politics. That's the answer. Let's see. There's a pull from the article. Here are some bullet points of, I guess, what the state's response to the spike was. And here, highlighted as per Dr. Piercy, no adolescent COVID-19 vaccine outreach or any other child/adolescent vaccine outreach is to be conducted. That's the politics, whoever Dr. Piercy is. He made the call. Stop telling people to safeguard their health with vaccines because he's such a great doctor. Or she is. I don't know. Internal documents also reveal, Brett says, the health department spent weeks planning special vaccination events designed specifically for adolescents. Then lawmakers got mad. So the agency ordered its staff not to hold any vaccination events specifically designed for adolescents. They spent all this time doing it, and then they said, don't do it, because a couple of Republican politicians are steamed. Tennessee has restarted much of its vaccine outreach to teens using a softer tone. If these efforts were never halted, would things be different? Don't know. I do know that this state has the worst outbreak in the U.S., and infections among kids look like this. And there's an enclosed chart, and you don't want to know. I mean, it's a spike like you can't believe. Like no one has ever seen before. If I was Trump, I would say such a thing. And you can see it if you go and take a look for Brett Kelman on his timeline. This is a series of tweets from yesterday, and you can see the chart for yourself, and it don't look good. And you know who's to blame now, and that it was all politics. I mean, that's one of the more amazing things about this pandemic is that you can actually point to a political party and say it's their fault. Very often people will try and do that anyway, even if it's not that clear. But we've never really been in a situation where there were such clear lines between political parties about something as basic as vaccination. Everybody just sort of generally agreed that vaccination was a good idea for keeping yourself safe from disease, and it would be ridiculous for anybody to think that a political party could benefit from a position of you should just go get this disease. No one would have predicted that, and that's one of those things that really probably no one would have predicted, a couple of years ago anyway, that's where a major political party would come out on this. It's a little bizarre, to say the least. I wonder if by clicking on sometimes when you click on the piece through Twitter, when a reporter shares it, sometimes you get a special link to a readable copy. But I guess not. Too bad. I'm sure that would be a great article. And thank you, Brett Kelman, for reporting it. But maybe somebody who subscribes to the Tennessean could share it, or there's another source. But in case you were wondering, good follow-up on that story that sort of fell off the radar a while back. Okay, let's see. Oh, something else that Greg has shared here. Let's see, is it the same one? No, there are two. One in the back channel that he shared. Biden COVID-19 speech details so far per people familiar. We're getting leaks already. All right, well, let's take a preview here. Thanks to Adam Cancryn, I guess, Cancryn. I'm hoping it's not like Cancerin. But anyway, or a Politico reporter covering the COVID response, who says that the Biden speech details will include ordering all federal workers to get vaccinated with no opt-out alternative, urging schools to set up regular testing using previously allocated $10 billion, that was mentioned earlier on by Greg, and calling for international summit this month on global COVID response. So, sounds pretty good, and now I don't have to watch because I know what's in it. I could watch to see if that turns out to be the same as what was predicted, but I'll let someone else take care of that. How about that? The other thing he shared with me here, Ed O'Keefe, tweeting a video here. Watch. Why are some Californians voting to recall Governor Gavin Newsom? As well, reporter Juliet, I don't know who, we'll click on her bio and see her. Juliet at KPIX. Juliet Goodrich at KPIX reports, when you ask them their reasons why, they give you a long laundry list of reasons, and at the top of that list is the French Laundry, which I guess is the name of the fancy restaurant that he went to. And I was confused by that at the time that he went as well. And that kind of, maybe that was what sort of sealed it in my mind, is the idea of California man. Like, they reported the story, well, in the middle of COVID, he went to the French Laundry. And I said, what? He went to the laundry? What? How? I mean, you got to do laundry. What the hell are you talking about? No, the French Laundry. Like, as though there were people saying, like only in California could be walking around. People know what the French Laundry is. How? I don't know. I never, and it made me think, if enough people care about that in California, that they even know what the French, maybe they didn't know, but they explained, it's a fancy restaurant. But it seemed to me like, sort of the California man thing. Like, of course, everybody knows the top restaurants, the names of the top restaurants. Of course, Californians know those things because California, of course. I don't know. I just found the whole thing kind of strange. But all right, people are mad about that. And I guess they want to die from COVID as a result. Or at least some of the people do. All right, let's see. A couple other suggestions of stories bouncing around here. Let's see. If you saw the story of the latest angry Karen type lady, and I'm sorry, Karen, and all the Karens we know, we really got to find a new terminology for that, but it's such good shorthand, and it's really unfortunate for you. But the latest angry lady who has one of those names that people associate with angry, crazy ladies, who was running around coughing on people that she encountered in a grocery store because they were wearing masks, has been identified and fired. I don't need to identify her at this stage, I don't think, because there's nothing else you can do. She got what was coming to her. She got fired by her employer, and that sort of naming and shaming worked. I was a little reluctant to participate in it because I wasn't 100% sure she was being identified correctly, but I guess she has been. So anyway, don't do that. I can never figure out why people feel it necessary to run around and cough on people in order to show that they don't like masks. How about just not wearing masks would be enough? And I always figured that it was because people were approaching unmasked people and asking them, why won't you wear a mask? And that sparked them. But I think this unmasked person actually flipped the script on them and saw some masked people and just started harassing them instead. And I found that a little odd, to say the least. All right, let's see. To get things back on track here, let me dive into what we have parked in pocket and have been interested in sharing with you for some time. I haven't heard much from Armando lately about the idea. I thought he might be outraged, although he may be just too busy to be outraged on the radio, about the Supreme Court and its Shadow Docket stuff. But I grabbed from the other day and mentioned for you David Leonhardt's piece from September 3rd on the Shadow Docket. And I thought I might run through that and just share that with you. Rulings without explanations. Why is the Supreme Court using its, quote, Shadow Docket so often? And I think some of the other perspectives we've shared on it is because they can, and F you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And that ultimately is still what it comes down to. But we'll see if David put a nicer shine on it for the New York Times. The Supreme Court opinion allowing Texas to ban nearly all abortions was different from most major rulings by the court. This one came out shortly before midnight on Wednesday. It consisted of a single paragraph, not signed by the justices who voted for it, and lacking the usual detailed explanation of their reasoning. And there had been no oral arguments during which opposing lawyers could have made their cases and answered questions from the justices. It's sort of important, right? But yeah, I've been focusing on sort of explaining, well, why is it, how could it be? Because people were very unused to seeing things like this. How could it be that they come out with no explanation whatsoever of their ruling? And later they did offer a little bit. But at first, none offered. And I'm reminding people, there's nothing that says they have to tell you what their reasoning is. They like to do that so that they remain a respected institution and people think that they can come to a greater understanding of the law and where it is and where it will be in the future, or where it ought to go in the future, based on the reasoning. You get to understand what motivated the justices and what they might tolerate and what they might not in the future in the same area of law, but they don't have to tell you that. Nothing says they have to, and in this case, they just decided, it would be easier for us if we didn't. So they didn't. Now, instead, the opinion was part of something that has become known as the Shadow Docket. In the Shadow Docket, the court makes decisions quickly, without the usual written briefings, oral arguments, or signed opinions. All things that you don't really have to have. All it says in the Constitution is that you have to have a Supreme Court, and really not much more than that. In the Shadow Docket, the court makes decisions quickly, usually without written briefings or oral arguments, all that stuff, right? In recent years, the Shadow Docket has become a much larger part of the Supreme Court's work. Shadow Docket rulings have shaped policy on voting rights, climate change, birth control, COVID-19 restrictions, and more. Last month, the justices issued shadow decisions forcing the Biden administration to end its eviction moratorium and to reinstate a Trump administration immigration policy. The cases affect us at least as much as high-profile cases we devote so much attention to, Stephen Vladeck, University of Texas law professor, told me. Shadow docket cases are frequently those with urgency, such as a voting case that must be decided in the final weeks before an election. As a result, the justices don't always have time to solicit briefs, hold oral arguments, and spend months grappling with their decisions. Doing so can risk irreparable harm to one side in the case. So for these reasons, nobody questions the need for the court to issue some expedited bare-bones rulings, but many legal experts are worried about how big the shadow docket has grown, including cases that the Supreme Court could have decided in a more traditional way. Shadow docket orders were once a tool the court used to dispense with unremarkable and legally unambiguous matters. Myra Donegan wrote in The Guardian, "In recent years, the court has largely dispensed with any meaningful application of the irreparable harm standard." The next section is about why the shadow docket has grown. Why have the justices expanded the shadow docket? In part, it is a response to a newfound willingness by lower courts to issue decisions that apply to the entire country, as my colleague Charlie Savage explains. And let's just take a look at the headline on that piece. See if it's interesting on its own. Texas abortion case highlights concern over Supreme Court's shadow docket. We can continue on, I think, at this point. But there's also a political angle. What? No way. Shadow docket cases can let the court act quickly and also shield individual justices from criticism. In the latest abortion case, there is no signed opinion for legal scholars to pick apart, and no single justice is personally associated with the virtual end of legal abortion in Texas. The only reason that the public knows this precise vote here, 5-4, is that the 4 justices in the minority each chose to release a signed dissent. Critics argue that judges in a democracy owe the public more transparency. This idea of unexplained, unreasoned court orders seems so contrary to what courts are supposed to be all about. Nicholas Stephanopoulos, a Harvard law professor, has said, if courts don't have to defend their decisions, then they're just acts of will, of power. Who would have guessed that they might want to do something like that? During a House hearing on the shadow docket in February, because they knew about it even then, of course, members of both parties criticized its growth. Knowing why the justices selected certain cases, how each of them voted, and their reasoning is indispensable to the public's trust in the court's integrity, Representative Henry Johnson Jr., a Georgia Democrat, said. Representative Louis Gohmert, Texas Republican, and I think he actually was a judge himself, believe it or not, at some point, said, I am a big fan of judges and justices making clear who's making the decision, and I would welcome reforms that required that. The shadow docket also leaves lower court judges unsure about what exactly the Supreme Court has decided and how to decide similar cases they later hear. Because the lower court judges don't know why the Supreme Court does what it does, they sometimes divide sharply when forced to interpret the court's non-pronouncements, writes William Baude, B-A-U-D-E, a University of Chicago law professor and former clerk for Chief Justice John Roberts. Baude coined the term the shadow docket, so it's not something that they came up with, of course. The court's 6 Republican-appointed justices are driving the growth of the shadow docket, and it is consistent with their overall approach to the law. They are often, though not always, willing to be aggressive, overturning long-standing precedents in campaign finance, election law, business regulation, and other areas. The shadow docket expands their ability to shape American society. Gee whiz, why would they want to maintain and expand it? The 3 Democratic-appointed justices, for their part, have grown frustrated by the trend. In her dissent this week, Justice Elena Kagan wrote, "The majority's decision is emblematic of too much of this court's shadow docket decision-making, which every day becomes more unreasoned, inconsistent, and impossible to defend." Yeah, but the point is it's also impossible to attack. I mean, you can attack it as stupid and opaque, but you can't attack the reasoning if there isn't any. In an interview with my colleague Adam Liptak last week, Justice Stephen Breyer said, "I can't say never decide a shadow docket thing, but be careful." Well, that's a very judicious statement, as is what we would expect. Roberts also evidently disagrees with the use of the shadow docket in the Texas abortion case. In his dissent, joining the 3 liberal justices, he said the court could instead have blocked the Texas law while it made its way through the courts. That the court chose another path means that abortion is now all but illegal in the nation's 2nd largest state. The justices are likely to settle the question in a more lasting way next year. They will hear oral arguments this fall in a Mississippi abortion case, the more traditional kind, outside the shadows, and a decision is likely by June. So, anyway, there you go. You got some sense of David Leonhardt's understanding of why they're doing it, and it's the more polite version of because we can and F you, and if you don't like it, come and get us. And, well, I mean, that's all there ever really was to it, and there's no way to fancy it up, quite honestly. All right. Another story that I think you ought to be aware of. We're running up against our next break, but perhaps we can squeeze it in afterwards. Maybe I can save it for the next segment. But here's something, I guess, since we were on the subject of the court, I thought was kind of weird and that I tucked away. I made a tweet about it at the time, which was back on September 1st. But I guess in the wake of all the other Supreme Court nonsense and some of the COVID nonsense going on here, let's see. What did I see? I saw the tweet of Amanda Mull, a writer at The Atlantic, reacting to a tweet from David Mack, who is from BuzzFeed News. So what did he have to say here? He's got something from the CEO of Sweet Green, the salad restaurants, I think, if I've got that right. To no one's surprise, a young young CEO type has something to say that's not entirely positive about vaccines and masks. Whoop-de-doo. And of course, he thinks that maybe we don't need vaccines and masks because he's very healthy because he's the CEO of a salad company. So, great analysis there. But reacting to an article in Vice, which says, the long-form version of it, Sweet Green CEO, vaccines and masks will not save us, but salads might. The pricey salad chain CEO took to LinkedIn to espouse his views on the pandemic, such as that Americans who got seriously ill were too fat. You very often hear, obesity is a comorbidity and therefore a complicating factor, and people who get COVID or people who are exposed to COVID are much more likely to get it and to get it seriously if they're overweight. And I guess he thought he saw an opportunity here to say, eat more salad and then you won't be overweight and that will save you. And we won't read through the entire long form thing unless during this next break I say, oh my God, it's so outrageous you have to hear the whole thing. But okay, so David Mack commenting on that and just saying, oh my gosh, that's incredible, what a thing to say. And then Amanda Mull saying, well, basically, I don't know, her reading of it, I don't know if he ever comes around and actually says this, but her reading of the article, now we might have to read it, is the government should coerce people to buy salad. Is, as she says, a hell of a convenient belief for a salad millionaire. And I can't believe there are salad millionaires, but that's true, and what a strange position to take. However, as she continues on, virtually everyone needs better access to fresher, more nutritionally dense food, and more money to buy it, more leisure time to prepare it, better knowledge of what they're eating, how to cook it. Let me know when Sweet Green pivots to address literally any of those things. It struck me, though, of course, that position was pretty much the same as the broccoli mandate that Scalia thought was coming after all. Hi, it's me, David Waldman, your host for Kagro in the Morning. I have good news to report. Many more listeners like you are making critical contributions that keep our show on the air. It makes good sense, of course, and patreon.com, Patreon.com, makes it simple. Now you can make easy, secure, recurring monthly contributions to support our show. Patreon.com/KagroX gets you straight to our donation page. Maybe you'd like to thank us for helping keep you sane during the Trump era. Maybe you're looking forward to in-depth explanations of what's going on in the Biden administration. Whatever it is that keeps you listening, we need your help to keep bringing it to you. And hey, if you happen to prefer using PayPal or even the Square Cash app, we're up and running with those options too. Thanks again, everyone, for all of your support. We literally could not do this without you. All right, welcome back now to the Kagro in the Morning Show here on Roots Radio. I guess I'm somewhat intrigued now by the salad CEO's view of things. It's not entirely nonsensical. It's just a little bit like, maybe a little trifle tone deaf, just like I guess people are saying Gavin Newsom was being by going to a fancy restaurant, especially a restaurant called The Laundry, French Laundry, which I would be like, that doesn't sound like it tastes good at all. I'm not going. But what do I know? I'm not from California. Anyway, so let's take a look at this advice here. Sweet Green CEO, vaccines and masks will not save us, but salads might. And, he's got a certain point. Long story short is, he says, well, if everybody, ate healthier and was, generally speaking, less obese, and that's not going to solve the problem for everybody, obviously, but, sure, in general, if we all ate healthy food, I guess everything would be awesome. But, a $15 salad isn't really helping everybody eat, healthy. But I guess that was the point of, I forget whose tweet it was that we were reacting to. And does everybody even, Amanda Mull, right? Does everybody remember, too? I know we cut out really quick at the end of the break. Does everyone even remember that Scalia, in considering one of the various cases involving the Affordable Care Act, basically said, well, this whole thing is pretty dumb. The government mandating various things, health practices as part of this act. Are we going to have a broccoli mandate? Can the government mandate that everyone eat broccoli? Because I guess in his mind, eating broccoli is a healthy thing, and so therefore it would fix everything, and he hates broccoli, so therefore that's a bad thing. But I don't know. Not certain why he picked on broccoli, but it would be interesting, right? So he predicted that the government, if we followed this path and allowed the Affordable Care Act to stand, eventually people would be asking for a broccoli mandate. And lo and behold, Amanda Mull reveals to us that basically it comes in the form of salad rather than broccoli. But it's basically the equivalent of a broccoli CEO saying, that's not a bad idea. And not necessarily just because it will make you healthier. But anyway, let's take a look at this. As I mentioned, this was a September 1st article. So from mid last week. And, look at this. All right, well, anyway, Edward Ongweso Jr. is the writer here for in Vice. On Tuesday, the CEO of Sweet Green, and in case you don't know about them, they're the French Laundry of salad, apparently. A restaurant chain that sells salads for around $15 a serving, said that the underlying problem with the COVID-19 pandemic that has killed more than 600,000 Americans so far is that most of them were fat. By the way, our number is over 670,000 now, just to put a finer point on it. 78% of hospitalizations due to COVID are obese and overweight people, Jonathan Neiman said in a LinkedIn post. Is there an underlying problem that perhaps we have not given enough attention to? Is there another way to think about how we tackle healthcare, and he puts that in scare quotes, by addressing the root cause? Root, get it? He's a salad guy. Neiman, N-E-M-A-N, by the way, is somewhat correct in that most people who were hospitalized or died because of COVID-19 also had comorbidities that made the virus more deadly, such as being overweight. A CDC report from March indicated that obesity was an independent risk factor for severe COVID-19 symptoms and death. But while Neiman is onto something, it's impossible to separate his comments from the fact that he profits directly from a particular and costly idea of, quote, health. In his post, Neiman stated, "No vaccine or mask will save us," and floated the idea of health mandates. COVID is here to stay for the foreseeable future. We cannot run away from it, and no vaccine nor mask will save us. And then parenthetically, in full disclosure, I am vaccinated and support others to get vaccinated. Our best bet is to learn how to best live with it and focus on overall health versus preventing infection, he said. I don't know if that really stands up, but that's what he said. What if we focused on the, all caps here, root cause, and used this pandemic as a catalyst for creating a healthier future? With two question marks, he asks. We clearly have no problem with government overreach on how we live our lives, all in the name of health. However, we are creating more problems than we are solving. What if we made the food that is making us sick illegal? What if we taxed processed food and refined sugar to pay for the impact of the pandemic? What if we incentivized health? He added. Sweetgreen, as a company anyway, did not immediately respond to Motherboard's request for comment. Motherboard is the Vice magazine vertical there. Neiman's argument is similar to the rationale of John Mackey, the Whole Foods chief executive, who told the New York Times last year that eating, quote, healthy, for example, the foods sold at Whole Foods, is the solution to America's healthcare crisis. He added that obesity wasn't an access problem, but a market demand problem, and boiled down to poor choices mostly due to ignorance. I guess he's trying to argue here that prices would come down and people would be able to access healthier food. If there was more demand for healthier food, then the prices would sort of come down market a little bit. And, there's an argument to be made for that. I don't know if it necessarily holds up, but okay. Neiman's advocacy for solutions such as targeting processed foods has also been tried during the pandemic. In July 2020, Britain rolled out new policies to fight obesity and a better health campaign to focus on individual choices such as smoking, diet, exercise, and drinking. A Nature article reviewing these policies and the campaign found that they relied on shame and guilt in ways that could encourage crash dieting and an unhealthy relationship with food, which can be very detrimental to long-term mental and physical health. One of the policies limited advertising of foods high in fat, sugar, or salt, as well as improving food labels to provide more nutritional information. As Nature points out, however, this boils down to a simplistic message of eating less and moving more, as opposed to asking about the complex interaction of factors leading to obesity, including genetic, environmental, and socioeconomic factors. Meanwhile, Neiman proposes financially punishing people who eat cheap but unhealthy fast food, rather than expensive but, quote, healthy Sweetgreen. It's notable that Neiman doesn't mention, say, the reluctance to fully fund a social safety net that includes food stamps or provide free, nutritious meals for the millions who regularly go without or are forced to eat cheaper, often less healthy options. Sweetgreen may describe itself as being committed to building healthier communities by connecting people to real food, but perhaps that should be amended to real expensive food that has been criticized over the years for being not as healthy or as accessible as the salad chain insists. Okay. By the way, an update tells us that after this article was published, Neiman deleted his LinkedIn post. However, it is still available via the Internet Archive, so can't hide from that, after all. Okay. Well, it's pretty interesting. Well, I don't know. I mean, I guess you have to expect that a salad CEO would promote salad as the ultimate cure for everything, just as you might expect Regeneron manufacturers to promote Regeneron as the ultimate cure for at least whatever's bothering people right now. Anyway, I just thought it was pretty interesting, and I'm sure that Scalia fans everywhere are considering his broccoli mandate comments vindicated by the fact that there's a salad mandate in the offing. All right, let's see. A couple other stories that we can share with you here. Let me look through Pocket and see if we can't identify some of the others that have slipped through the cracks and ought to be reported on. Oh, let's see. What have we here? Oh, there's a couple of very interesting items here, and they have, in fact, slipped through the cracks. Let's share this one here. Jane Meyer tweeting about a week ago, right? September 2nd, with a couple of exclamation points leading this first sentence, like right in front of the sentence. But I don't know if I'm going to get the article itself because it's a Wall Street Journal piece, but noting that James Simons, Robert Mercer, and others at Renaissance to pay $7 billion to settle a tax probe, according to the Wall Street Journal. All we can perhaps get out of it is the lead paragraph before the paywall comes up. But let's just take a quick look here. A tax settlement which current and former executives will personally pay, or are supposed to personally pay, may be the largest in history. Gregory Zuckerman and Richard Rubin reporting this for the Wall Street Journal, but we won't be able to read the whole thing. But yes, current and former executives of hedge fund Renaissance Technologies, that's Mercer's place, will personally pay as much as $7 billion in back taxes, interest, and penalties to settle a long-running dispute with the IRS, the firm said, a tax settlement that may be the largest in history. Whether or not they actually pay it, I guess, remains to be seen, but sounds like an interesting bit of progress in the fight against the tax evasion habits of the rich. I wonder if we might be able to find more reporting on it outside of the Wall Street Journal, but let's see. Robert Mercer, tax settlement, and see if anything comes up in the news in readable form. Wall Street Journal. Here we are. New York Times gives us one that might be readable. Hedge fund insiders agree to pay as much as $7 billion. They said they agreed. The agreement ends a long-standing tax dispute involving a decade's worth of transactions at Renaissance Technologies, one of the world's biggest and best-connected hedge funds. Matthew Goldstein and Kate Kelly reported this one, also on September 2nd. A years-long dispute between a pioneering hedge fund and the IRS ended Thursday with an enormous bill for taxes and penalties, as much as $7 billion. Of course, while that debt was riding, Robert Mercer used his billions of dollars, to almost wreck the world by backing Donald Trump, of course, and continues, I guess, to back the idiot Steve Bannon as well. James Simons, the mathematician whose algorithmic approach had been adopted by many other investment funds, and some of his former colleagues at Renaissance Technologies have settled a decades-long dispute with the government over tax treatment of some of their investments, the firm said in a letter to investors. The settlement, which involves 10 years' worth of trades made by the hedge fund, could be worth as much as $7 billion. According to a person with knowledge of the agreement, it is one of the largest federal tax disputes in history. The deal ends a standoff that led to a congressional investigation and involved two politically connected financiers, Mr. Simons, a long-term patron of Democratic candidates with an estimated net worth of $25 billion, and Robert Mercer, a former Renaissance executive whose advocacy for conservative causes included helping to found Cambridge Analytica. After Donald Trump won the 2016 presidential election, the now-defunct political consulting firm became embroiled in a scandal for harvesting Facebook data without users' consent to assist his campaign. While Simons, who's 83, stepped down as chairman of the $55 billion firm last year and supported Hillary Clinton in that race, Mercer, 75, has donated tens of millions of dollars to Republican candidates and political action committees. He also reportedly invested $10 million in Breitbart News, which was a key supporter of Steve Bannon, who was Breitbart's chairman before becoming Trump's chief strategist. The billions in payments to the IRS will be made by current and former investors in a small group of Renaissance funds, but principally its Medallion Fund. Those investors include 7 people who were members of the firm's board between 2005 and 2015, as well as their spouses. Mr. Simons will make a payment of $670 million on top of his obligations as part of that group, according to the letter. Renaissance's board ultimately concluded that the interests of our investors from the relevant period would be best served by agreeing to this resolution with the IRS rather than risking a worse outcome, including harsher terms and penalties that could result from litigation. Peter Brown, the firm's chief executive, wrote, the Wall Street Journal and Bloomberg reported the settlement earlier Thursday. Renaissance is best known for pioneering a data-intensive form of stock trading called quantitative strategy, which has been adopted by many other hedge funds and trading platforms on Wall Street. The settlement centers on the firm's Medallion Fund, which manages about $15 billion, mostly for employees and former employees of the firm and their family members. That's sort of an interesting built-in feature of those hedge funds. They don't actually operate for the benefit necessarily of their clients, except insofar as their clients are themselves. But, some people would say that's where I want to invest my money, where my investment advisor invests his own. Mr. Simons founded the firm in 1982. Once the head of the math department at Stony Brook University on Long Island, he was a code breaker for the U.S. military during the Vietnam War. He stepped down from the firm's day-to-day operations in 2010, handing the reins over to Mr. Mercer and Mr. Brown as co-chief executives. I will say this. I think Mercer has a similar background, although I think he was doing better financially in his private sector work than you might imagine the head of the math department at Stony Brook University might be doing. But yeah, you kind of have to admire it a little bit to say, well, math professor and code breaker. I mean, he's a great mathematician, but it just doesn't pay a whole lot. And he must have said, well, I'm constantly being told that rich people are smart people. That's why they're rich. They're so smart, they, figure out a way to get rich. And certainly I, as a mathematician, ought to be able to do that. And he was. It's kind of admirable in a way. Although at some point you probably should just stop or give away a whole lot of that money. But anyway, now he will. It'll just be to the government. Mr. Simons was one of Mrs. Clinton's biggest supporters during the 2016 presidential elections. In the past election cycle, he gave millions to a super PAC focused on winning a Democratic majority in the Senate. Mr. Mercer, whose annual pay as co-CEO of Renaissance was estimated at between $125 and $135 million by the financial media, is his political opposite. A former IBM programmer, Mercer and his daughter Rebecca were significant financial supporters of Trump during his 2016 campaign. In 2018, the New York Times reported that contractors and employees of Cambridge Analytica, eager to sell psychological profiles of American voters to political campaigns, acquired the private Facebook data of tens of millions of users, the largest known leak of in the company's history. Facebook eventually said as many as 87 million users, mostly in the United States, had their data harvested by the firm. Mercer's decision to resign as co-chief of Renaissance shortly after Trump won the presidency came about in part because of his involvement in bankrolling Cambridge Analytica. Some of the hedge fund's investors had voiced concerns about Mercer's political activities. The firm's letter on Thursday said that aside from the board members and their spouses, other investors will be required to pay additional tax and interest owed, but no penalties. Renaissance's outside clients, who include wealthy individuals, pensions, and other investors, are not expected to be affected by the settlement. The tax dispute involved the medallion's fast-paced options trading and how those transactions should be taxed, a major consideration given the firm's rapid-fire trading had a history of generating big profits. At the time of the transactions, the federal tax rate on long-term capital gains was about half of what it was for short-term capital gains. The hedge fund argued that many of its trades were eligible to be taxed at the lower rate because it had converted those options trades into longer-term holdings through the use of complex financial instruments. These instruments involved baskets of stocks put together by a bank. But Medallion didn't buy the actual basket of stocks. It instead bought an option on that basket and sometimes gave the bank instructions on how to trade those stocks. Basket options have been criticized for having allowed hedge funds to borrow money more easily and allowing them to make bigger and potentially riskier trades. The IRS argued that the basket option trades should have been taxed at the higher rate because they were mainly the result of short-term trading. The disagreement drew the attention of Congress and led to rule changes. Following a report from the Senate Permanent Committee on Investigations, the IRS issued new guidance in 2015 that sought to clamp down on this type of trading by making it more difficult and costly for hedge funds to buy basket options. Such investment vehicles had to be declared on the tax returns of any investor who used them, the agency said. The IRS has said its guidance on basket options would be retroactive and applied to all transactions as far back as January 1st, 2011. Still, some senators were critical of the IRS for taking so long to change its rules and start investigating the trading practice, including at Renaissance. Senator Carl Levin, the Michigan Democrat who headed the Senate committee in 2014 and who recently died in July, said the IRS guidance would stop banks and hedge funds from using dubious structured financial products that had cost taxpayers billions. Elise Bean, a former aide to Mr. Levin, said she wished her former boss had lived to see the settlement. It's good to see that despite a years-long knockdown, bare-knuckles battle, the IRS prevailed in compelling at least one set of billionaires to pay the taxes they owe, she said. Pretty interesting. Okay. Well, that's interesting. There's a correction at the bottom here, but it says an earlier version of the article referred incorrectly to media reports about the compensation of Robert Mercer. His annual pay as co-chief executive of Renaissance was between $125 and $135 million, according to reports, and that's what we read. They did not say that he had an estimated fortune of $125 billion. Okay. Well, I guess now we know. So, yeah, that is pretty interesting. I wish we understood the whole basket options thing a little bit better, but I guess that's what it comes down to, is that they thought, well, technically, though we're trading on these things daily in the options market, these are, in fact, long-term capital gains because stocks, not short-term because options. And, wow, well, they shielded an awful lot of money, and I guess eventually the IRS went ahead and won. And I guess while we were saying that he hadn't been paying all these taxes, he was in the meantime, Mercer was, but also Simons, funding political campaigns like crazy. But it sounds like with the personal fortunes that they've made on this stuff, they probably could have paid the additional taxes or paid the fines and still had plenty left over to send to super PACs and the like. So I'm not certain that it really could have been prevented, per se. All right, well, that is pretty interesting, and we'll try and keep a closer eye on what that means in the future, I think. But I don't think it'll mean the end of Mercer's involvement in politics, unfortunately. All right, let's see. A couple of other things. That seems like an interesting one. It's all over the place, the interesting stuff. Let me throw this one in here, because it's been waiting a little while, too, and might become relevant again. I've been wondering what the hell's going on out in Arizona. I still don't think we have heard the final results of the fake audit from out there. But in the meantime, this story jumped out at me from TPM. Matt Schuam reporting this on September 1st. Election truthers are spilling sensitive data everywhere, and they're not sorry. I think it's a quick read, and we might be able to get it in before we conclude today's show. In May, a federal judge dismissed a Trumpy lawsuit over the 2020 election results in Antrim County, Michigan. We remember that one, where a clerk's error had briefly resulted in a miscount of the vote. Quote, expert witnesses in the suit had seized on the discrepancy, which they claimed was a result of Dominion voting machines technology, purposefully designed, they say, to tamper with vote totals. Doesn't sound really very likely, but that's what they were saying. Crucially, while the judge had decided to allow the plaintiffs to make and analyze digital copies of the county's election equipment, that material was put under protective order, sealed behind a judicial decree, away from the public's eyes. That is, until last month. The data surfaced where? At pillow magnate Mike Lindell's Cyber Symposium that we've heard so much about, where some attendees were shown the digital image of the Antrim machines. Not everyone took organizers up on the offer. I said, I haven't seen the Antrim image because I didn't sign a protective court order to obtain a copy of the image, but I bet they have stolen court evidence here. Recalled Harry Hursty, a cybersecurity expert who focuses on voting equipment and who attended the event. Hursty opted not to evaluate the Antrim County image itself, but he did take a look at what's known as metadata, logistical details, including when the image was made and by whom. It lined up, Hursty said, with the document that ought to be under seal, created December 6th by Greg Freemeyer, one of several people listed in the Antrim lawsuit. In Freemeyer's case for his digital forensic imaging expertise. The apparent leak of a sensitive digital image from Antrim County is just one of a wave of such leaks in recent weeks, as Trump supporters intent on proving that the 2020 election was stolen have increasingly taken things into their own hands, sometimes quite literally. The court and recorder of Mesa County, Colorado, is now under investigation for another leak, in this case of her own machine's software. Clerk Tina Peters has acknowledged taking digital images both before and after a recent software update carried out in person by employees of her office, the Colorado Secretary of State's office, as well as Dominion. But Peters hasn't been able to explain how those images ended up online and shown to members of Lindell's symposium, which Peters attended. How could that possibly have happened? One wonders. The Colorado Secretary of State's office says an unauthorized individual was in the room when the software update happened, aided by staffers from Peters' office. The true believers in Trumpland haven't tried to hide their enthusiasm. And some more enthusiasm. Right. This is going to be like a training book on how to look at server logs. Phil Waldron, one of the speakers at Lindell's symposium and one of the expert witnesses in the Antrim County case, said after noting that people in the cybersecurity-focused breakout rooms at the symposium were getting access to the Antrim County and Mesa County data. Another speaker at the symposium, Doug Frank, hinted separately that, I've lost my place here. Hinted separately at the Mesa County information by referring to, quote, sympathetic clerks around the country who'd enabled full forensic imaging of election machines. The staffers in Peters' office, accused by the state of facilitating a serious leak, have nonetheless continued to rally in support of her in recent days as she remains out of the public eye, as has Sharona Bishop, an ally of Peters, who was on stage with her at the Lindell Symposium and who previously served as Representative Lauren Boebert's campaign manager. How strange. Weird, eh? She's involved in this too. At a public meeting Wednesday, Bishop denied personally sharing any passwords to county election equipment, then went on the offensive. This is appalling to see the script being flipped on citizens and on duly elected clerks and recorders who were investigating on behalf of their people, and it was not criminal what she did, Bishop said. Well, I guess that's the answer. She says it wasn't criminal. Well, so basically what's happening here, before the article ends up and before we run out of music, I guess the clerks and elections officials are cracking through on this code and taking sensitive data about how these machines work and leaking it to people in an effort to show that the votes could have been hacked in 2020, and wink wink, that they might be hacked in 2024 if, say, you wanted to hack them. More projection.
From
Can hardly believe it.
netroadsradio.com. You have been listening to Kagro in the Morning with David Waldman.
I guess essentially it comes down to another case of them trying to prove that fraud could happen in an election by perpetrating the fraud themselves. Very interesting how Republicans are always the ones that seem to be caught red-handed in all of this. Anyway, West Coast Cookbook and Speakeasy up next with Justice Putnam. Stay tuned to see what he's got in store for you.